Support for Flying Valiant builds is brought to you by 1st and 64th Customs, Video Geek Productions, Ryan Smith, Matchbox Mark, Jonathan Vonesh, Wade Hendryx, Larry Presnell, and Donald, and from support from viewers like you. Please like, share, and subscribe. Well, a little bird told me that Jay's special lady's having a birthday. Now, what better gift to give than a barn find? Hey there, folks. Chuck here. Or should I say, welcome back, because this build is for the JDC family. This is a build that was called for by Jay over at Jay's Custom Diecast. He is a prolific YouTube builder and has done so many builds, and it's been amazing watching his channel grow so quickly. And he had a special request, and it was one that I couldn't say no to, even though I've been doing my best to get away from challenges so I can work on some of these commissions that I have on the back burner. But he has a very special woman in his life who happens to love Ferraris, and he asked for folks to do some builds for her birthday. And I just happened to be sitting on this beautiful Hot Wheels metal body, metal base Ferrari Daytona that I'd just been itching to build, so it all worked out. There was a little more to the build, and I'll get to that in the breakdown. Like I said, the challenge was to build any Ferrari casting, and while this wasn't a requirement, there was the request to send it to Amanda on the 21st of June for her birthday. Like I said, I chose to do the Daytona, and I wanted to do it as a barn find. Oh yeah, and happy birthday, Amanda. Ready? Punch that subscribe button. Let's boogie. I had no sooner gotten the car apart when I experienced the tiniest and most adorable interruption. Take the teeny tiny Allen wrench. And we spin, and the screws go in the holes.
And then you're going to let me play with it after it's done?
Maybe, we'll see. This one is for a friend.
But who is it?
It's for a woman named Amanda. She is the girlfriend of one of Papa's friends.
But it's not a boy.
No, it's for a girl. Once we cleared that up, I drilled some holes for the rear view mirrors, and after the body was stripped, used some snipped axles to make some side view mirrors, got rid of the nub, and added my own 3D printed steering wheel. I love these interiors that have the fold-away dashboards. It really makes it easy to put in the steering wheel. It was time for primer, and it was tough to decide on the color. I've done 2 red Ferraris already, so I needed to do something other than red. And while white was tempting, I ultimately decided on yellow, because in my head, Ferrari Daytonas are yellow. I used yellow ochre on the lower part of the car and faded up to straight yellow, and then mixed in some white to get pale yellow on the top of the car. While this car was a barn find, it would probably not experience too much paint fade, but as the dust would accrue on the top of the car, there would definitely be some appearance of fading from the dust, and I wanted to help that illusion along. All the pictures I saw of Ferrari Daytonas had black dashboards and black rear areas. While I had the black out, I painted all the ignore me spots, then followed up the interior with some heavy khaki to imitate a light-toned leather, varnished wood for the steering wheel, and some Vallejo oiled earth wash in the middle of the car, followed by some warm gray as a base for the exhausts, some dark rust deposits to outline the frame, and while I had the dark rust deposits out, I did a quick swipe and pat on the exhausts, some oily black for the drivetrain, and just the slightest hint of tarnished steel on some of the exhaust. And since I had the tarnished steel out, it was time to do some details on the dashboard. I know I'm a huge proponent of the Stuart Simple mirror paint, but I actually used no mirror paint on this build. I wanted everything to be matte and dull and dusty, so all the things that I would normally do with Stuart Simple mirror paint was done with DSP tarnished steel, and that includes the trimmer on the windows. While the exterior was drying, I went over the interior with some black panel liner from Tamiya, and while that was drying, I did a Vallejo brown wash over the chassis. Tarnished black for the rear vents, and some more tarnished steel as an undercoating for the turn signals, and the tiny grille that you almost miss on these cars. And before I got too far, I needed to remember to put the yellow center in the steering wheel, because almost all Ferraris have that iconic yellow center in the steering wheel. Before I put the steel away, I remembered to highlight the trim pieces on the actual glass piece. No pledge dip this time because, as you'll see in the final, there's not a lot of shine anywhere on this car. Because the car was going to be so dusty, I wanted to make sure that the turn signals stood out, so I used deep orange from AK Interactive. Once the brown wash had dried, I did a dirt wash from MIG, and here's the big twist of this build. Just a day before I needed to have this car finished, my package arrived from Mexico. These are the Scuderia 73 wheels that I've heard very good things about. As a lover of steel wheels, I had to get a couple of their conventional wheel sets, which remind me of Mopar steel wheels, and come with an optional hubcap, which is pretty cool. And they come in ready to paint and pre-chromed options. But for this build, we want the Italy Sport wheels. They come with instructions, which I quickly figured out are in Spanish and English if you keep reading. There it is. These sets are interesting because they come with little tiny caps, which you can see in that Ziploc bag, and you're supposed to be able to cut the axles to fit and use glue to bond the end cap to the axle. This did not go well for me. More on that in a minute. I will say I was very impressed with the quality of the wheels. They are beautifully cast. They feel almost like metal. They have an excellent weight to them, and the tires are very soft and very rubbery and have an excellent tread pattern. I'm definitely happy I made this purchase, and I'll probably buy more. It's also nice that they come with two different size options in case you have a rake setup or you have, like this car, a smaller wheel tire setup. Here's me struggling repeatedly to try and get the end cap on. I'm sure you could get it if you had steadier hands or greater patience than I do, but since I'm me, I ended up opting for snapping an old axle in half, driving it through the Scuderia wheels, and using a piece of brass tubing to hold it all together. And that seemed to work out just fine too. With the car all together, it was time to add the partial car cover. I started by lightly dabbing on some diluted matte Mod Podge, then cutting a piece of tissue paper to slightly larger than the car to mimic a real car cover, and gently pressing it into place like a car cover that had been pulled back a few years ago but never returned to where it was supposed to be. The trick with this, because the tissue paper is so fragile once it's wet, is to use as little matte Mod Podge as possible. I overdid it with this one, and I ended up having to do it again. This is actually the second application. The other trick is to not press too hard because you don't want it to conform perfectly to the car, because a real drop cloth or car cover would not perfectly mold to the car. It would have a little bit of stiffness and set away from the car just a little bit. So make sure it conforms in spots, but not against things like where the windshield meets the body frame. Let there be a little gap there. After some time in the food dehydrator, the tissue paper had become quite stiff and ready for paint. This is Wraith's Bone, getting carefully applied over the top. Painting this is also tricky because you want to make sure you go very light with the paint. The tissue paper will absorb it very well. You don't have to press hard on the brush. You also have to look carefully because sometimes the tissue will become almost invisible, it's so transparent. But if you go over it with the brush, it'll show up and look like the car cover or tarp that it's supposed to imitate. At this point, I was once again visited by a tiny interruption who wanted to help with the paint for Amanda's car. So I suggested she practice on the work area. And of course, she wanted some help making her favorite color.
Purple.
We're learning about mixing colors.
Yes.
I think you need red and blue to make purple.
Yes, but can we put red and blue here?
Sure.
And there?
Let's put some blue here. And we'll put all your red right next to it so you can mix. After bedtime, it was time to start working on weathering the car. I knew this wouldn't show up, but I was so excited about this new filter, I had to try it. This is gray for white from MIG, and it is extremely subtle, and I love it. If this was a fresh tarp, I would just use this and leave it be. It does just enough to add dimension and accent a few shadow areas, as you can see here. It is fantastic. Then it was time for my favorite filter, the dust filter, and that's where you can really see the weathering start to come alive. Then the subtle dirt to add some modulation to the dust. dust, especially in areas where dirt and dust would settle. On the few Ferrari barn finds I could find, a lot of them had a really heavy mildew look to them, so I used this Decay Deposits from AK Interactive. That is a dark gray, slightly greenish tint to it, and it's perfect for representing dust that's mixed with moisture and started mildewing. And a little of it goes a very long way. I only dipped my brush once to get all this. Once I was sure I was done with all of the various filters and deposits, I went over all the gaps with the Tamiya black panel liner, which was tricky because there are these body moldings that cut into the doors that you really don't want the panel liner in. So I had to go back over those areas and clean them up. I also used the odorless mineral spirits to lighten up a little bit on the decay deposits because I thought they were just a little too intense. So I calmed it down on the hood just a little bit. I also broke out the gray-green pigments from AK Interactive. This and the decay deposits are from their Abandoned Vehicles kit, which I highly recommend. It does a great job of dulling the aluminum and adding mildew stains to the car cover. This is some AK Interactive European Earth pigment as well that I used around the bottom of the car and a few strategic parts on the hood and the tarp. I also used just a little bit of the moss deposits from the Abandoned Vehicles kit to add some heavy mold to the car cover. Once it was all set, I needed to seal it up with some Ultra Flat from AK Interactive. And once it was dry, it was time for the number and the decal, and I had just enough time to snap some pictures and send it on its way. But before we go, let's take one more look at what we started with. This is a battered and play-worn Ferrari Daytona from Hot Wheels that I found at a flea market for 50 cents, and with a little work, I made it look even worse. So that's it. Happy birthday, Amanda. Thanks for sharing Jay with the Diecast community. We love having him here, and we love it when you make an appearance in his videos. So thanks for joining the Diecast family. As always, I want to thank my patrons who keep these videos rolling. You saw the Bandit level patrons at the start of the video. I'd also like to thank Mid-Island Customs Diecast, Maple Leaf Matchbox Makeovers, Double B's Customs, Gary Tasker, Tracey Sutherland, and Mr. Zanzibar 91. Also the Douglas level patrons, the Good Bad Better podcast, Jordan Kleinhenn, Curtis Crafts, and Jim Silva. Thank you all so much for keeping the lights on at the Flying Valiant Garage. As you may have noticed with Donald, our newest patron, at the beginning of the video, we have crossed the $200 a month mark on Patreon, which is incredible. That means that all of my patrons are now eligible to win one of my customs every month in our monthly Patreon giveaway. You can find out more about that and how you can help support the channel over at flyingvaliant.com. I'd love to have you on board. I'm really backed up on commissions right now, but if you're not in a hurry and you want to buy one of my previously built customs, order one of your own, or place a request for custom decals or 3D printed parts, you can always email me at flyingvaliant@gmail.com and I'll see what I can do for you. I was fortunate enough to be visited by my brother Justin and his wife Jen this weekend, and he was kind enough to point out a spelling error that has been in my lower third here for months now, and I never noticed, so thank you, Justin. I've got a special video with him coming out very soon, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss it. Once again, a happy birthday to Amanda. A big thank you to Jay over at Jay's Diecast Customs. Please be sure to go subscribe to his channel and tell him I sent you. As always, I want to thank you for coming along with me for the ride. So until next time, stay fresh, cheese bags.